So to begin, I have a few statistics that I wanted to share with you because I think these are very interesting statistics about targeted mail, or more specifically, junk mail. The average American household receives 41 pounds of junk mail every year. 44% of that junk mail goes completely unopened. The average American household gets 16 pieces of junk mail a week. And this is all according to the nonprofit 41pounds.org. According to the NYU School of Law, this 41 pounds a year translate to 1.5 trees per year per household of junk mail that's going unopened and unread. Well, we don't want that to happen to our Boys and Girls Clubs, and we know that our mail is not junk. And so let's talk about how to have an effective targeted mail program that gets opened and gets noticed. There is an important role to an appeal letter, even in the digital age. The majority of gifts are still not given online, even though online giving is growing. And so as long as that is the case, the appeal letter is still going to have an important role. First, it helps with donor acquisition. This is a way that you can reach out to people that you don't know yet to try to get some new donors to work through your pipeline, build up through cultivation, and ultimately ask for big gifts. Secondly, the appeal letter helps with donor retention. And it might seem counterintuitive that asking someone for money is the best way to hold on to them. But if a donor makes a gift, let's say they attend your chili feed or your steak and burger, and then they don't hear from you, they aren't going to start to see themselves as one of your donors. They aren't going to continually be renewed. But if you're sending them something asking them to renew as a donor, you're able to hang on to that donor. And donor retention in the fundraising industry nationwide is very low. So it is a great idea to use any strategies that can help you hang on to your donors. Next, the appeal letter can play a role in donor upgrade. So if your donor gave $25 last year and you have a way to personalize that letter and ask for, say, $50 this year, what you're doing is encouraging them to upgrade their gift until they get to the point that you're going to start having more face-to-face communication with them to try to build them towards an ultimate gift. Now, there are two different kinds of mail. We tend to say that what we're sending out from clubs is direct mail, but really what we're sending out is targeted mail. So the difference is direct mail is sent sort of blindly to a mass list. For example, you might send a letter to everyone in a certain zip code. The response rate of a direct mail piece like that can be about 2%. It's a 1 to 3% response rate is expected when you're just sort of blindly mailing to whoever. Hopefully, at your club, you're a little bit more strategic in terms of who you mail to, and you're using what's called targeted mail, where you're sending to people who have specific characteristics in common. That might be that they're all your own former donors. That might be that they're connected to the club in some way. For example, they know a board member or they volunteered at the club. Or it could be even just slightly more strategic, like you've gotten your hands on someone else's donor list. You're mailing to everyone who belongs to a certain country club. So there are various degrees of direct versus targeted mail, but I would encourage you to use targeted mail rather than direct mail. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of a targeted mailing now that I've said that it seems like such a great idea. The huge advantage is in a cost and labor savings. If you're sending out hundreds of mailings to people who may have no connection to your club and you're only getting back 1 in 100, that's not really very cost effective. It's not time effective either to spend the time on stamping and sealing and stuffing and mailing these letters that are probably never going to be answered. Now, of course, a disadvantage of targeted mail is that it takes time to put that list together. You don't have the opportunity to bring completely new and unknown people into your organization, and it takes more work. But it's probably worth it in the long run when you think about the impact your mailing is going to have. So what constitutes a good mailing list? Well, if you've ever gone through your database, you've probably noticed all kinds of people and things in there that you know probably shouldn't be there. I used to be with a club here in Omaha, Nebraska, where I'm talking to you all from. And when I first went through our database, I said, what are all these pizza places doing in here? We had probably 10 different pizza restaurants in our database. Well, the reason is because they had donated pizza. And when we sent them a thank you letter, they could put into our database. Well, we don't need to send a direct mail piece or a targeted mail piece to every pizza restaurant in Omaha. They're not going to make a gift to us. So I had to go through and really work with the list as to what's going to constitute a good mailing list here. So be sure that your list is accurate. Try to remove folks who you know are deceased, for whom you don't have a good address, who haven't given in a while, or mark them as inactive in your database so that you're not wasting time and money, yours and theirs, as well as paper, sending to people who you're not going to hear from. There are hot versus cold lists. And this is sort of like targeted versus direct. A hot list is people who have given to you before, who are great leads, who you know are going to make a gift when they get this mailing. And a cold list would be like the country club mailing, where you know there could be some connection, but you don't know how much. So hot lists obviously are going to have better connection, but it's a good idea to put in some at least warm prospects so that you are building up your mailing list each year. And then the last thing in terms of the list is good records management. So, you know, with data, it's garbage in, garbage out. And so if you aren't updating your list as you get mailings, as you get those returned mail, as you get new addresses, as things are forwarded, then the next year your list is going to be worse and worse. But you can keep improving your list based on the information you get when you send your mailing out. And you should have some kind of mechanism to do this. Hopefully it's a database, but if you're using an Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet, be sure that you're updating it nonetheless, regardless of where you're keeping your data, because your data is really one of your best assets. My daughter is 6 years old, and when the mail comes, she will sit there and go through the mail and say, junk, junk, bill, ooh. And then every once in a while, there's something that catches her eyes. And I think this is kind of what this cartoon is getting at, where he says, how do you know it's junk mail without even opening it? Well, the problem is that a lot of times people decide that our mail is junk mail without even opening it. And if a 6-year-old can figure it out, then certainly an adult donor can too. So you want to do what you can to increase your response rate. Remember, with a true direct mail, you should only expect a 1 to 3% response rate. Obviously, that number is going to go up dramatically when you're using targeted mail. The rate also increases with follow-up. So this might be a follow-up email. It could be phone calls. It could even be a follow-up mailing. A lot of clubs have had luck with doing a phone-a-thon in conjunction with their mailing, waiting a couple of weeks, and then board members get together with club staff and make phone calls and just ask, did you receive our mailing? Do you have any questions? Would you like to talk about a gift? So that can be a really good way to increase that response rate. If you don't have the time or the volunteer power to make that happen, following up with some emails, some posts on your Facebook page, updating your website so that they all have the same ask and the same message is a good way to get that follow-up as well. In terms of increasing your response rate, the outside envelope is crucial. If you have a plain outside envelope that doesn't catch anybody's attention, if you're making it look a little bit too much like it's your run-of-the-mill solicitation, it's probably not going to get opened. Especially your higher wealth individuals are getting solicited by every nonprofit in town, and so you need to be sure that what you're sending out stands out. Research has been done to look at what kind of postage has the highest response rate. And as you might guess, a normal stamp has the highest response rate, but a standard stamp is expensive. And once you multiply that across hundreds of pieces, that's really too much out of your pocket. So the second best response rate was found with bulk rate stamping. So these look like regular stamps, but you only have to pay the bulk rate for doing them. And of course, you'd want to talk to your local post office to be sure that you're following the right criteria for a bulk mailing. But this had the second highest response rate because it looks like a stamp. Things that are pre-printed look like junk mail. And that's a real cue to us, a visual cue to throw that piece away. So recommending that you use bulk rate in your bulk stamp to save money and to get your piece opened. Be sure you comply with postal regulations. I was talking with a director of development from a club who had put together this really great direct mail piece with a really cool printed envelope. And when she took the piece down to the post office to mail, she learned that there was printing on a part of the envelope that needed to be blank per USPS regulations. And so they had to throw them all away and start all over again, costing them time, money, which is not to mention the emotional toll of having to do the whole thing over. So what you can do is once you have kind of a proof put together either in-house or by your printer, take that down to the post office and ask if there are any concerns or problems. Is this oversized? Will this require additional postage? Anything like that. so that you don't have any surprises once you've printed a whole bunch of these or even gotten them posted and ready to mail. Always include a response card. We need to make it absolutely as easy as possible for people to make a gift for us. And yes, it's cheaper not to include a response card, but the opportunity cost isn't worth it. Some clubs will say, well, I put a link to my website. That's not enough. Most people don't give online. You're getting a lot of checks. And if you're going to give checks, you need to have a response card and a reply envelope. What a lot of folks do is open your letter, hopefully, and then they'll just set it aside with their bills. And when they're paying bills, they'll grab that envelope, write you a check, and put it in the mail. But if you haven't made it easy for them to make a gift, you probably won't get a gift. Here are a couple of examples of good outer envelope and reply card. So this outer envelope didn't take a lot of colors. It's just, black, white, and blue. But it's got that picture of the kids. It's got that donor empowerment call to action. You can save the lives of teens. And rather than a plain outer envelope, it's something that'll get noticed by the donor. Here's a great example of a good reply card, too. You can see that this one asks to give the gift of a great future this season. This was a holiday card. And then there's the yes box to check. It's colorful, it's nicely laid out, and it summarizes what your gift would go to support. So what they did is figured out how much it costs to keep the club open each day by calculating their total budget divided by their total number of days open. And that's really empowering to a donor to feel like, I kept the club open for a week. My gift really makes a difference to kids. So this is a great example of a response card. Let's talk for a little bit about the content that should be in your direct mail or your targeted mail piece. Starting at the top with the salutation. If you don't know the salutation and you're tempted to fill out Dear Friend, save yourself the trouble and throw that letter in the garbage, because that letter isn't going to get answered. I know that what I'm receiving from nonprofits is a piece of targeted mail that's going to lots and lots and lots of people. I know it's a form letter, but I don't want to feel like I'm receiving a form letter. And so if I get a Dear Friend letter in the mail, I'm not going to donate based on that. If you don't know their name, you shouldn't be asking them for money. So throw those out. Next, and the most important word in writing your letter is the word you. Marketing research lists the word you as one of the 20 most important words to include in an advertisement because it is so very powerful. And in nonprofit work, it's extremely powerful. What you want your donor to feel when they read your letter is that they can change the world for kids, that they are the difference maker in the lives of the children of their community. What we tend to write in letters, though, is the club is doing these amazing things. We are so wonderful. Listen to all of our great impact. But that's not going to be as persuasive to a donor as that feeling that their gift makes a difference. So use you language instead of I language. Have a clear call to action. Your call to action is asking for support. So we've got call to action on this list and ask for support on this list. You want to be encouraging them to save a life today. You want to encourage them to take action now. You want to encourage them to make a gift for a kid, things like that. And you want to repeat it several times. You don't want your letter to beat around the bush and make people guess what you're writing them about. And as we'll talk about, people are mostly skimming your letter. So you want to be sure that it's skimmable and I can tell what it is that you're asking me for in the letter. We have a question from Wally Graffin. Do you include options for pledging for more than 1 year or monthly withdrawals from a credit, etc.? You bet, Wally. Great question. On that reply card, I think as many options as you can include to show that you are adapting to the donor's needs, so much the better. And these serve you really well as well. So why not ask them if they'd like to pledge for multiple years? And then you can just contact them back the next year for that next installment of the gift. Even better if you can encourage them to make monthly gifts. So they just check a box and say, charge my credit card this certain amount monthly. Monthly donors give about 40% more than one-time donors. And it's money that you can budget based upon. You know that $10 from Susan Snozzy is coming every single month. And if you multiply that across lots of donors, suddenly you've got a steady stream of income. It's a great technique to help the donor stay engaged with your organization and to increase their gifts. So absolutely include an opportunity for them to make monthly withdrawals. While you're at it on that checkbox, you can also include an opportunity for them to indicate if they have a planned gift to your organization, or if they'd like to learn more about including your organization in their estate plans. Because you never know, there are gifts out there that we don't even know about. And since this is one of the only times we may be hearing from some of these folks, why not let them tell us as much as they possibly can? Great question, Wally. Thank you. So we talked about how in the letter you want to ask for support, have a clear call to action. A question that people ask about a lot is signatories. Who should sign this letter? Should it be the whole board? Should it be the board president, the CEO, the RD committee, a community member? Believe it or not, research says it's not all that important who signs it, unless that person is someone of great prominence. So I worked with a club who had a really key community leader do their annual mailing one year. And they said, we have given to this organization because it matters to us, and now we're asking you to do the same. In that case, the signatory is important. But when you're sort of debating between one staff member or another, one board member or another, it doesn't really matter. But the research does say more than 2 signatories is too confusing for the people reading the letter, and it's pretty unnecessary. You're probably trying to spare feelings at that point at the expense of your return rate. Have a strong closing to your letter, one that really gets to the point of what you're asking for and really wraps it up. And include a PS. And the reason that you want to include a PS is because people are skimming that letter really quickly. And what research is showing is that people read the first paragraph and the PS, and that's about it. So that final PS is that last call to action. PS, don't wait, save a life today. So let's talk about the mechanics of your letter as well. Obviously, you want to be sure you have proper spelling and grammar, and be sure that the letter is typo-free. Before I was working in nonprofits, I worked on political campaigns. And we had an event coming up, and we were in a hurry, and we were stressed, and we were working long hours, and those are all my excuses for what this invitation said. It was an invitation to sweets, treats, and other good eats, a little dessert reception with the senator. Well, sweet was misspelled. So eat is spelled E-A-T, treat is spelled T-R-E-A-T, and when we put this invocation together, we spelled sweet S-W-E-A-T. Sweats, treats, and other good eats. Fortunately, we did not mail it out. We caught the mistake, but those kind of mistakes definitely can be costly. So proofread it, read it for grammar, read it for spelling, pass it to your board, ask them to do the same, then pass it to somebody else, so you have lots and lots of eyes checking for these kinds of mistakes. Make sure that it's readable. We have the tendency to try to cram as much information as we possibly can into that letter. Your letter isn't a brochure. Brochures are for insiders. Letters are for outsiders. So you want to be sure it's quick, it's easy to read, with lots of short sentences, colloquial conversational language, because we want it to sound relatable. Think about how fast you write a letter, probably at about 1 mile per hour, very slowly and very methodically. But your donors read it at about 100 miles per hour. So it needs to be short, quick, and easily readable. Your English lit teacher would not approve of the way you write an appeal letter, with sentence fragments, one or two sentence paragraphs, ellipses at the end of sentences, but all of these make it much more skimmable. You want to use many visual points of entry. These are things like boldface, italics, bullet points, sidebars, pictures with captions, so that it's easy to just jump in and read a few things. And then an eye-catching layout. Make your letter look good. If it's just lots of words on a page, it's not going to raise very much money. Speaking of English Lit, the best reading level for an appeal letter to be successful is an 8th grade reading level. And so I wanted to include on here how to calculate your reading level in Microsoft Word so that you can go back and actually do this when you're getting your mailing put together. Now, if you go through and you find out you're at 8.5 or 9 or 7, that's fine. But if you find out that you're at like a 12th grade reading level, you need to dumb it down just a little bit. This is really important in terms of making it quick, easy, skimmable, and most of all, lucrative. In terms of the style, be sure that you have a strong opening and closing. Tom Ahern, who is an amazing direct mail guru, and I recommend you look him up online and read some of what he has to say. Tom says, take a look at your letter, read the first sentence, and then cut it out. Because so often what we do is have that awkward and very formal first sentence. That's not adding anything. That's not going to catch anybody's attention. What you really want is to get right to the point. This is an appeal letter that I just absolutely love. Listen to this opening. Katie stood in line patiently until she received her meal. Her mother waited for her and her sister by the front desk. Sweetheart, your mother's waiting. It's time to go, I gently urged. But I have to get supper here. If I don't eat here, there's no food at home. My jaw dropped as I realized that food insecurity is very real in Ames, Iowa. Sadly, Katie and her sister are not alone. According to Feeding America, 1 in 6 children in Story County are unsure of where they will eat their next meal. And nationally, 1 in 5 live in poverty. Okay, so what makes this a strong opening? Just type right into the chat box. Either visually or in terms of what it contains. What makes this a strong way to open an appeal letter? It's emotional. It's incredibly emotional. It pulls at your heart. Can't you just see that little girl looking up at her director and saying this? Interestingly, you'll notice that in these first 2 paragraphs, she doesn't ever say the words boys and girls clubs. She's still trying to tell that story. She builds a little credibility by having those statistics in there, and then she has that nice graphic as well. So we're really getting people interested. There are things written in bold so that we can be sure that the reader notices them, and none of these words are too big, hard to read. It's not too complicated. So this is a nice, strong opening and closing. And we have a question. What was Tom's last name? I did skim over that very quickly. Thank you. His last name is Ahern. It's A-H-E-R-N. Tom Ahern. And he's really a great source about writing well to donors, about persuasive writing to donors. Speaking of persuasive writing, remember to keep that letter donor-centered. Focus it on what they can do or what they already have done with past gifts. Focus on how the donor makes these things possible, not how you make these things possible. We often want to focus our letters around things that we need. We need a new van. We need money to keep the lights on. We need money to pay our youth development professionals. And those things are all true. But as a donor, I don't respond to needs as much as I respond to opportunities and outcomes. I have the opportunity to help serve 100,000 hot and healthy meals to kids. I have the opportunity to raise the average grade point of kids at my local high school by 1 grade. Those opportunities and outcomes are really going to matter to me much more than what you need. So it sounds harsh, but it works. Make sure the letter's emotionally compelling, just like this story of Katie. It really pulls at your heart, as Patricia said, and that's going to make a difference when it comes time to sign that check. And goodness sakes, make your letter interesting. I've written them. You've read them. Those letters that sound so corporate and so formal and so jargony. You may have some resistance from other people at your organization. I've heard people say, look, we're an educational organization. We need to show high vocabulary and elevated grammar. We do in some things, but in our fundraising letters, we don't. Because you're trying to make a personal connection with people, and you're not going to do that using corporate speak. So let's talk about analyzing your results. This is the really interesting part. And if you're getting ready to tee up an end of the year mailing now, hopefully you're starting to plan that, you can analyze last year's results to give you some input on what you should do going forward. Okay, so to analyze your results, first, wait about 2 months from the time you mail your letter. At that point, you're probably not going to be getting very many more. Next, track how many donations you received in direct response to that mailing. How many people sent you a gift with the reply card enclosed. And then you can calculate your response rate. And this is just the number of responses divided by the number of letters sent. Once you have that, you can also calculate your income to expense ratio, which is your money raised divided by your money spent. So how much does it cost us to raise $1 by mail? And how many people out of the people we mail to are sending us a reply? This next one, though, I think is the most important in terms of deciding your strategy moving forward. And that's deciding what the mode gift is. So the mode is the gift you receive the most often. And I think we would instinctively think, no, we need to figure out the average. But one really high or one really low gift can mess up your whole average. So let's say, for example, I received a $25 gift, a $25 gift, a $1,000 gift, a $25 gift, a $25 gift, and one more $25 gift. The average gift then is $187.50. But that's not really what most people are sending in. That $1,000 gift messes up the results. The mode gift is $25. That's the gift that most people are giving you. And the reason you want to calculate the mode gift is the next time you send out a mailing, make that the lowest level gift that someone can give, or even elevate one gift level above it. So if I got tons of $25 gifts, and one of the goals of my targeted mail program is to start building up the amount each individual donor gives, then maybe this time I'm going to make my minimum level 50 or 35. Send yourself a copy of the letter. That will prevent that agonizing time where you're wondering if your letter actually hit mailboxes, if it's hung up at the printer, where your letter is. So send yourself a copy. And I have a great tool on this slide for analyzing your results. So mrss.com/toolshed/. This has calculators built in that will let you do all kinds of cool analysis of your results of your mailing. Things like a t-test for average gift size, benchmarking your results with those of your peers, calculating average revenue per recipient, calculating, giving you other ideas for inspiration, and a lot of other neat links about digital appeals in particular, but these work for print appeals or digital appeals. So it's just a really cool source. I have for you a direct mail self-assessment that you can download after the webinar. And this is just what it contains. And really all this is all the things that we've talked about in this webinar, just kind of laid out for you so that you can kind of check them off. And that way, if you're looking through, it will give you a way to say, oh my gosh, I used I language the whole time instead of you language. If you've got someone on your staff or on your board who's really hesitant to kind of adopt some of these methodologies, maybe they could work through this direct mail assessment with you to get a feeling for what's really going to be effective. This is how you would score the direct mail self-assessment. And hopefully you'll end up at that 20 to 22 post office, here you come. A couple of other just sort of outside points about your mail piece. Some clubs have had great luck with getting printing donated either by local printing companies or by the corporations for whom their board members work. This can be a fantastic way to get your board members engaged, get their organization engaged, and you can credit them right on the mailing with just a small printing provided by X, Y, or Z. Sometimes corporations may have access to a mail house and be willing to stuff and stamp and seal your letters for you. So that's great too. That's a practice that a lot of clubs have been able to access that can help make your mailing a little bit more affordable, which we certainly want. At this point, I think it would be great if anyone has had great success with their mailings to maybe just type in the chat box, what have you done that's been really successful for your club? Was it an outer envelope? Was it a great reply card? Was it focusing on a particular social issue? Was it an interesting graphic layout? The timing of your piece? Anything like that. Just type in the chat box so other people can kind of benefit from your expertise and your experience as well. Emily says every mailing our club has club-specific branding, lots of kid photos, and bright colors. And gosh, the photos, I don't think we can emphasize enough how effective it is to include those photos of kids, because our kids are cute and the stuff they're doing is impressive. The picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Thank you, Emily. Bright colors, of course. If your club has it in their budget to have multicolor printing, that's going to be a lot more effective than plain black and white. Anyone else had a particularly effective mailing? One other thing I'd love to do, you see the place where you can raise your hand. There's a little hand icon. Raise your hand if you're planning to do an end of the year mailing. Raise your hand if you're planning to do an end of the year mailing. So far out of 15 of us, about 10 are planning to do an end of the year mailing. We have a webinar coming up that deals with effective year-end techniques. But I would suggest to those of you who aren't planning to do a year-end mailing to give it some serious consideration. This is the most effective time of the year to have impact at doing a direct mailing of some kind. And this is when you're going to get those dollars, right? So consider doing a year-end mailing. I would if I had a club, says DOD Wally Graffin. Wally, you can help all of your clubs to do year-end mailings. It's a great way to raise money. You want it to hit the mailbox after the Thanksgiving weekend, but before you get too far into December. Oh, this is a great question. Patricia says, do you ever recommend putting something in the envelope that makes it a little bulky to entice people to open it? You know, Patricia, I used to have a colleague who, prior to being in fundraising, always said he was a junk mail expert. And my friend who was the junk mail expert would tell you anything that makes people enticed to open your letter is a good thing. Whether that's a handwritten note on the outside of the envelope, something that makes it look bulky, something that tells you there's a gift enclosed, things like that that get that thing opened are all a good idea. Another, I should have addressed in my comments, a question that we hear a lot is, how many pages long should my letter be? And conventional wisdom always said 1 page. And so direct mail companies have tested what's the most effective length. And they actually found that 2 or more pages are more effective than 1. Now, once you're starting to spend a lot of money on a multi-page mailing, that may not feel good, but you can do a front and back or 1 large legal page. So you're able to get that nice layout, those great pictures, graphics, visual points of entry, which would be really crammed if you're trying to fit it all in just 1 page. So at this point, I'm wondering if there are any questions from the group, any other questions about having a great mail piece. If not, here's my contact information. If you think of a question after the webinar, or you just weren't able to type your question fast enough, please feel free to call me or email me absolutely anytime. It would be my pleasure to help you with your direct mail piece. If you're wanting someone to look over your mail piece, I recommend reaching out to your Director of Organizational Development. And if you're a resource development person who hasn't worked with your DoD very much, just ask the CEO of your club who that person is. You can send that along to them because these are folks who have a lot of experience in resource development and who would be happy to help out. You're also welcome to send it to me. I'd be happy to look it over too. Thank you all very much for joining us for the webinar today. The downloads are available over on your dashboard. They're listed as handouts. You just click on the highlighted portion and it'll automatically start downloading to your computer. With that, I'd like to thank you all so much for being here this Friday afternoon. Wish you all a wonderful weekend and happy mailing.